Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 93 of the podcast, we are sharing a podcast episode where I was a guest. Specifically, today on the podcast is a rebroadcast of NCSM's Learning with Leaders podcast. Now, NCSM is a mathematics education leadership organization that equips and empowers a diverse education community to engage in leadership that supports, sustains, and inspires high-quality mathematics teaching and learning every day for each and every learner. And so a few months back, I was a guest on their Learning with Leaders podcast, and specifically their We're All Math People series, where I chatted with Katey Arrington, who is the NCSM President-elect, and Brian Buckhalter, who is NCSM Awards Chairman. And so the We're All Math People series has Katey and Brian talking with guests about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights about instructional decisions that make mathematics welcoming and engaging to a broad audience. Their goal is to have guests share how beliefs, practices, and policies have and need to continue to advance to ensure that each and every person sees themselves as a capable and powerful mathematics thinker. So this is something I could definitely get behind, and I was happy to be a guest, and being a guest and then having that episode out there, which I was on episode 84 of the Learning with Leaders podcast. And so the reason I wanted to share it is, like, I've been on a number of different podcasts, and this is one where I've gotten a lot of feedback from. And so I wanted to share it with y'all on this feed. So I asked for permission. Katey and Brian obviously are doing a great job with that podcast and kind of coming up with an identity for it with this We're All Math People series. And so I asked if I could share this episode with my audience, and they agreed. So, and also too, it's the end of the semester, and I'm trying to take a breath before creating some more content. So what a better time for a rebroadcast of this podcast. But anyway, but I'm not just doing that I'm not being lazy. I really do think that there's some cool stuff in there. And it's also cool that getting to share it and have conversations with Katey and Brian. And so, again, want to just take that opportunity to share. So be sure to check out the show notes for this episode at amidonplanet.com, episode 93, where you can find a link to the NCSM Mathematics Education Leadership website and the Learning with Leaders podcast. And without further delay, here is NCSM's Learning with Leaders podcast, We're All Math People series with Katey Arrington and Brian Buckhalter.
Hi, I'm Brian Buckhalter, NCSM Awards Chairman, and welcome to Learning with Leaders, We're All Math People. Thank you for joining me and my co-host, Katey Arrington, NCSM President-elect, as we talk with bold leaders and influencers about their math journeys and contributions. Today, we will hear from our special guest about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights about instructional decisions that make mathematics welcoming and engaging to a broad audience. Listen and learn about how beliefs, practices, and policies must continue to advance to ensure that each and every person sees themselves as a capable and powerful mathematical thinker.
Hello, listeners. I'm Katey Arrington. Welcome to the NCSM podcast, Learning with Leaders. Continuing our series, We're All Math People. Today's episode is dedicated to teaching math teachers as agape. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Dr. Joel Amidon. Dr. Joel Amidon is an associate professor in the Department of Teacher Education at the University of Mississippi, Vice President of Communications and Outreach for the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, and the President of the Mississippi Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators. Joel is also the host or co-host of several podcasts focused on the improvement of teaching: Amidon Planet, Road to Better Teaching with Dr. Ann Monroe, and Teaching Math Teaching Podcast with Dusty Jones, Jen Wolfe, and Ava Vanheiser. His specialization is in mathematics education and the improvement of pedagogy to address issues of equity and justice. Simply put, Dr. Amidon's work is focused on leading people to love others through teaching. Welcome, Dr. Joel Amidon.
Hey, welcome.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Katey. I appreciate that.
Yes. Listen, we are so happy to have you join us for this episode. And Based on the introduction that Katey just gave us, you really are not just involved, but I think committed to the mathematics education community. Share with our listeners a little, if you will, about your past experiences in teaching that have led to your current work.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I started as a high school math teacher in Sauk Prairie, Wisconsin. For those of you that are from up north, it's the home of Culver's, a Butterburger, if you will. I actually taught a Culver, which was one of my claims to fame. And so, but there in that context, I was also a field test teacher for Core Plus, which is one of the 13 NSF funded curricula that were meant to enact the standards. And that was like first time I got to dive into like kind of pulling back the screen and look at what kind of it is about it, like designing curriculum, enacting curriculum, and doing something that was a little different. Cause it was like, this wasn't like up at the chalkboard, like showing examples and sit and get sort of teaching. It was like they work in groups, and I was always like, well, what do I do if they're working? What am I doing? And it's like, and that was teaching, and it was a just different sort of idea about what teaching is and how we could be. And it was detract, which I know NCSM is really big on detracking. They have statements on that, which I'm all about because I saw the benefits of it in my own teaching, where we had people with all different abilities in the same classroom and they're learning from each other. It was awesome. So I had that experience, and then, went back and got my master's degree, got my master's in learning sciences from the University of Wisconsin. I'm a lifelong Badger. I'm wearing Badger gear right now, even. During that master's degree, I got a nudge from Dr. Mary Louise Gomez, who said, hey, you should think about coming back for a PhD. And as a first, generation college graduate, it was like, well, what does that even look like? I mean, a master's degree was beyond the end zone for me. So I was like, well, what does it even look like to do a PhD? And getting exposed to some of the work that was going on either through Wisconsin or influenced by the work that was happening at Wisconsin, some of the social justice work and some of the issues of equity and diversity that are being addressed through the DIME CLT, which was the Diversity in Math Education Center for Learning and Teaching that had kind of satellites in Berkeley, UCLA, and Wisconsin. I was kind of got to hook up to the back end of that. And it was awesome, the kind of work that was being done, and had a chance to do a dissertation there. And then you apply all over the country, and lo and behold, you end up in Mississippi, where I had a chance to enter my first classroom in Mississippi was with Brian Buckhalter right there, and invited me to, had an invitation to come in and see what teaching was like here. And then that led to my current role as in the University of Mississippi in the Department of Teacher Education, teaching teachers and teaching in a elementary math methods class, and just loving it. So.
And listen, on behalf of Mississippi and everyone, we're very happy you made your way here.
Yeah. There was a plan. There was a plan somewhere. It was good.
Absolutely. Happy you're in Mississippi and happy that you're here with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I live in Texas, and we have a Culver's here even. So.
Hey, all right. There you go.
Made it all the way down south.
I'll meet y'all at conference.
Yeah.
Dr. Amadon, we talked earlier about your work being centered around teaching math teachers as agape. Tell us more about agape, what that work looks like, and how it contributes to everyone seeing themselves as a math person.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about agape is one of the Greek words for love, and it's unconditional love. And so you contrast it with eros. So eros is, the love of Valentine's Day. It's a love like a love of desire, a love that's given to the worthy, versus agape is thinking about love that's given irrespective of merit, right? And so thinking about all the preparations that teachers are doing in the summer, even in our teacher preparation programs, or even the stuff that's going on before even the class role is presented, right? And so you think about all of the work that goes there, and there's teachers that are, and teachers of teachers that are loving on people without ever knowing the name, right? And so that's like love given irrespective of merit. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And so during my dissertation, I really thought like, well, what does it look like to do that, to like teach math as agape? That was my sort of dissertation topic. And I thought about it as like, there's 4 facets to the relationship, where it was like a functional facet. So that thinking about student, and I was thinking about it from a teacher perspective there, and So it was like that I wanted my students to be able to work with mathematics to be able to achieve success as defined by society. Then a communal facet where students can work in and with the context and practices of their community, and so that they could learn more, not only about themselves, but about the community in general. So they have that communal facet. And then in doing that, to also have a critical facet where they can work with math to analyze and question the world, right? So thinking about like some of those teaching math for social justice sort of things that are happening. But then also not just being bogged down by the problems of the world, but also have this inspirational facet that you can envision and you can work with mathematics to envision and work toward a better world, right? And so those were like the 4 facets we kind of thought about with regards to teaching math as agape. And so then in the, kind of moving from the role of teacher of mathematics to teaching teachers how to teach mathematics. So then you think about, what does it mean to teach math methods as agape? And so not only helping teachers to think about those facets from their own perspective, like, can they work with mathematics in those ways? And so, you can imagine like working with some folks, like just developing that functional relationship with mathematics can be good, but then also thinking about the communal, the critical, and the inspirational facets, and even like the influence of a teacher in developing those facets, not only for themselves in their role as a teacher and thinking about the better world that they can imagine through their role as a teacher of mathematics, but then also thinking about what does that mean for their students, and can they help facilitate those relationships with their students? And so teaching math as agape is about, again, giving irrespective. So what do we want to give? We want to give a desired relationship with mathematics. That 4 facets describes that relationship. And then teaching math methods as agape or teaching teachers as agape is like thinking about, how do you help those teachers facilitate those relationships? And what might it look like is modeling that kind of teaching, right? So we have some like learning modules that we do in our math methods that I've developed with some colleagues to help them see, okay, here's high quality mathematics that's using the context and practices of a community. There's the Teach Mathematics group that's out of like Corey Drake and Julia Aguirre and Tanya Bartel, and I'm missing, and Amy Roth McDuffie have developed some modules that kind of help, like, that kind of base a lot of that work off of too. And thinking about using those sorts of like materials and modules like that in order to facilitate, hey, here's what this could look like. Because sometimes, like, we might not have had the greatest experience. We might not have had folks that have been facilitating those kinds of relationships with mathematics that we're thinking about. And so in doing this kind of work, I think people get to see like math is more than just the symbol manipulation a lot of times than people get exposed to. And they get to see all the different kinds of ways it is that teaching mathematics can be, or the learning mathematics can be as well. And so like in doing that, they get to do math and think about it in recognizable context and with recognizable practices where learners can analyze and question the world and then imagine and work toward that better world. So thinking about those facets in their own experiences.
Oh, listen, that'll preach right there. I was over here doing the church nod.
Yeah. Well, Brian, and with that too, and thinking about it, like with math, we're not creating math people. Like if you're living and breathing, you're a math person. You are. And I love this series. I love the title of the series, but helping people recognize like the things that they're doing, like the mathematical, part of it, where people are making sense of problems and persevere in solving them all the time, and thinking about the logic and stuff. Now, how do we help them see like you're doing math? And so helping them recognize that, and then creating environments in classrooms where people can do that.
Yes, I love it. As you were talking about those 4 facets, Joel, you hit that 4th one, that inspirational facet about working to better the world. And it brings me back to a conversation that we had when I was in graduate school. And I can remember you just frankly saying, listen, when you reached this level of the work, you now have a responsibility to advocate and support those who can't do it for themselves. And so that's always just stuck with me and really, guided my day-to-day work internally, and realizing that it's more than just, I love how you said it, the symbol manipulation. Think about when we hear mathematics.
Yeah, well, and like we have this responsibility, like to be I think a steward of the profession, right? And so thinking about how do we do that stewarding? How do we take care? And like even thinking about some of the things that, I know Brian a long time, longer than Katey, but just seeing like the things that you've done within this community, but then also beyond, and even with this podcast and all the things you've done with NCSM, like, hey, you're doing it well. That's great. Be that steward.
I concur. She does it well.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. It's good to be among colleagues who are all working towards similar things.
Joel, in hearing about your work and reading about your work, I think it's pretty evident. One thing that stands out is, your desire to really help and support teachers. And anyone who knows you will probably even say people in general be better at whatever task they're tackling in life. How do you help people see beyond what may be barriers in their eyes, but opportunities in your eyes?
That's a great question. I don't know. Like you kind of get this sort of training, I guess, from the things that we're doing, at least from in my training as a doctoral student, like you were looking for ways that there are problems of practice, right? Problems of practice that you could have an impact on. And so, the problem that needs a solution becomes, okay, so how do we go about that? You saw one of the books that I was slid over as an early doc student was Radical Equations by Bob Moses, where, he saw you saw an issue with, in the state I'm currently in with voting rights, right? So he came and he saw an opportunity to help register people to vote and saw that as a way for them to access society. But then you think later on, Bob Moses saw it's not just, voting is a way, but also algebra. If you need to have algebra, math is as he said, a gatekeeper to citizenship. And so he saw then an opportunity to work into middle school spaces in order to make sure that students went into high school in a way that they weren't taking remedial math, so that they'd be prepared to take college level math, not at a remedial rate either, so that they wouldn't be behind, And Bob Moses is way ahead of the curve with regards to thinking about college debt, right? And taking on those remedial courses that don't count for anything, but yet you're still paying for them, right? And so I don't know, like over and over again, seeing how people have, if you see something, if something that's on your heart or something bothers you, that's a calling to you, maybe to jump into that space and do some work. Right. And so, I guess that's the thing. If like you're perturbed enough to see it, just like Bob Moses was perturbed enough to see like, hey, there's something that needs to be done. It's almost like you've been given a gift. Right? You've been given a gift that you need to go and take action on that space. I have a colleague here. You mentioned her name, Ann Monroe, and I kind of call, she's Batman and I'm Robin. And we kind of go into the Bat Cave every now and then, and we get perturbed on things. And it's like, okay, so what actions can we take? And rather than just, sit in your feelings, like thinking like, well, how can we take action? And now even thinking about not only can we take it, how can we facilitate and create space for others to take that action because they're perturbed as well, And so that's kind of that thing I see is like, there's the problem becomes an opportunity. Not that we don't want problems, but there's always going to be problems. But if you have the giftedness and the skills and the knowledge to see it, then you probably have those same things to take action on it.
Nice. That's really encouraging. I think a lot of us sometimes sit back and we see things that we want to impact and that we want to change, but we don't feel like we're in positions to enact such change when really we are. I've once heard one of our colleagues, we were in a meeting one day and she said, if you can't move a mountain, move a rock. It's that idea that, when we see problems, big or small, they really are opportunities for us to make that ripple of change that eventually becomes the wave.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that. We got to see the Bob Moses in each one of us because he was one person who did incredible things and we all have that in us. Right.
Yeah.
Well, so Bob Moses was one incredible educational leader, and being an educational leader right now is pretty challenging, probably more complex than it ever has been before. And it can be pretty tough. So Dr. Amadon, as a leader of learning and a supporter of many and teaching with Agape, how do you keep your own bucket filled?
Well, I'll say, oh, sorry, I cut you off. Well, I was going to say, like, I love this question. The math teaching podcast, we talk about that too. We used to have this question where we talked about how do you, get things done versus how do you make sure you get the right things done and still have a good life, still living a good life and making sure you're healthy and taking care of yourself. And so this idea of bucket filled, right? So I think there's a couple of things, like my faith is pretty important to me and my family. So that's a big part that's a bucket filling thing. And if you know anything about Agape, you can see like there's faith ripples through that. But then also just thinking about family, making sure family time, taking some priorities for that. And so family and all that. Good coffee is also, but I think with good coffee also comes with opportunities to share that space with others. So if it's just like this afternoon, having a moment with a colleague and having a hot beverage together you just take a moment to pause and be present with somebody, right? And to, as you're sipping, that's a chance to listen, right? And like as they're sipping, it's a chance to exchange and having those moments. I remember during the pandemic, it was like, you noticed that I was having a lot of conversations, a lot of Zoom conversations with people. I mean, meetings all the time. I was seeing people, but everything was like some sort of exchange. Like we are meeting for this purpose. It was almost like there's like tokens we were handing back and forth virtually versus like eventually I just said, hey, I'm going to have the Zoom open. We called it Friday Fish Fry. I'm from Wisconsin. So Friday Fish Fry is a good thing. And like having fish fry on Friday at noon, this is just come and talk. We need to chat because there's like, we missed that, right? I mean, we had our family.
Connect. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to connect. Exactly. And I know other people did that too. I'm not inventing that, but like, that's something, about having those sorts of being present connections. And then also too, I mean, as you said, I record a lot of podcasts and I guess, it's something y'all are probably learning. The sneaky secret about podcasts, and maybe not so secret because I keep saying it, is you get to have conversations with fun people. And like, that's been great. I mean, I know like, yeah, exactly. And so like, the people you get to talk to, and like, I just had a conversation with my clinical instructor that podcast is going to go out in a couple of days from when we're recording this. And my clinical instruction from 20 years ago, I could call him and talk to him, but like we went and recorded one on a book called Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers and talked about the implications for teaching. And it was just an awesome conversation that I got to have with him. And then we get to share it too with others because it's like, he's awesome and I want to share his awesomeness. And so that's kind of fills my bucket too, is that other people get to hear some of this awesomeness that I get to experience with them. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we really appreciate, you sharing these stories through your podcast and just the inspiration that you provide to listeners that you may never know about, which is, the essence of teaching, making these moments, memories in each other's lives. So, yeah, I love it. And I can't wait to see you for coffee, and I'll be waiting on the actual Friday fish fry.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You can't tease me with a fish fry.
That's right.
Put us on the list.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So within all of your work, how do you measure and recognize and celebrate the successes that come within the work that you do?
I've actually been thinking about this one a lot. And so I'm actually going to share it. I'm going to deflect a little bit and look at
Fair enough.
So there was an award that was given to Dan Chazen at the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators Conference. Dan Chazen is another person whose work I've looked up to. He's at the University of Maryland. He's done some awesome work with thinking about the practice of teaching mathematics, and just a deep thinker and someone I had a chance to interact with early on in my career. I was trying to interview and get a postdoc and I got this job at Mississippi, but he still thought about me with regards to opportunities because we've had a good conversation. And so he got this reward for his research on math teacher education. And during the talk that he was supposed to give on, his contributions, what did he do? He talked about other people's contributions. the work that was facilitated through his work. And, or, the thing that he was able to offer, that facilitating opportunity for others. And it was like, it was the biggest message I could have ever heard, is just seeing this person being given accolades, and could have really taken a moment and said, well, let me talk about that. But he pointed to others, and it was just like, that's what I want. That's what I see is, there's a great book called The Long Haul. It's an autobiography of Miles Horton. Miles Horton ran the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, which is where people like Bob Moses and Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, they would go, and Ralph Abernathy, they would go there and learn about helping communities help themselves, right? And it's that same sort of feel. It's like, it's really not about the work that Miles Horton did, but about the work that others did. It's not the work that Dan Chazen did. It's about the work that others did that he could facilitate. And I really, that's kind of thing. And it's kind of a nice thing. Brian knows, because we're in a town that's not very big, but I get to go visit schools, and I see students of mine, and even students of mine that are teaching my own kids, and how they're thriving in those classrooms. And that's how I think about, recognizing, celebrating success, is looking at not only the work of those teachers, but then, students that I've had a chance to work with, doc students I've had a chance to work with. And it's just, it's really cool to see that, and see the successes that they're having. That's how I see success.
That's awesome. And for your work, I'm happy that you're able to see the fruits of your labor. So huge applause from the many of us who have been directly and indirectly impacted by your work.
And I guess, too, you think about, like, I know we're talking about math education, leaders in math, but you see, like, the trickle down of the care that people give towards, like, even I think about, Brian, the care you've given to your predecessor, Candy's cook, and like seeing how she cares for the teachers in the district that I get to see. And you see, like, it's like these dividends that are paid forward, and it's beautiful to be able to sit back and see that and be able to experience it. And so, I don't know, like, the beautiful side of math education, I think the more we can talk about that and share that, and then people get to see, like, those sorts of aspects of success, I think the better there would be.
I love it. It's like the epitome of teaching, right?
Right.
To have this long-term trickle-down effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really amazing way to think about leadership, and your success is the success of those around you and the growth of those around you. And for every one of those successes, they're going to have more successes, and all of those people are going to contribute to the success of your students. So it's very, very heartwarming. Well, Dr. Amidon, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we leave, how can our listeners keep up with you and your work?
Well, I have a website, amidonplanet.com. We're all about learning how to teach better. And so on that front page, there's usually the updated version of the different podcasts. So the Road to Better Teaching podcast with Ann Monroe, or the Teaching Math Teaching podcast with Dusty, Jen, and Ava, or just my personal podcast is just Amidon Planet, kind of like my little playground there. So those are there. And then any presentations or things are there as well. I did want to share one thing. I know this was going to skip over, but there's a message to leave the listeners with. There's one that always helped me. And I think sometimes with the teachers, they get to think about this message. And I was given this board from my wife that had this message on it, said, believe there is good in the world. And then in that message, you've probably seen this before, highlighted is be the good. And the thing that I like about that is believe there's good in the world. Sometimes with some negativity that can go around, you got to believe that there's good in the world. But then at the same time, be the good. Like, you can take action towards that good. So I know I need that. I need to read that every now and then. And I think that's something that helps me out. And I think trying to do some things that, the things that we're investing in others, like, I mean, you are all the teachers out there, all the math leaders out there that are, listening to this, man, you already are being the good. And so then obviously you can believe that there's good in the world. So
I like that. Don't wait for the good to come. Be the good.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Yeah. I was gifted actually with a t-shirt from Joel with that message on it. And I'll say I wear it often when I'm traveling, Joel. And you won't believe how many people really stop and look at the shirt and they like give me a smile or they're giving me a thumbs up or, it's just that little confirmation of we're in this together. Let's be good together.
Let's be the good. That's right.
I know, Dr. Amdun, I know, Joel, you shared how our listeners can keep up with you, but I also wanted to share some exciting news. And so if this news is not accurate, we'll just edit this part of the podcast out. But if I'm not mistaken, I just heard that you will be the keynote speaker at a conference coming up here in Oxford, Mississippi later this summer. It's the For the Love of Math conference happening on June 28th here in Oxford, Mississippi. And we are just so honored to have you. And we're looking forward to the word that you're going to bring to our participants. So thank you for that.
No problem. I'm excited about that. That's cool.
Thanks so much.
We hope that you have been inspired by this bold mathematics leadership conversation and will tune into our podcast series each month. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can learn more about NCSM, Leadership in Mathematics Education, and our upcoming professional learning events on the NCSM website, mathedleadership.org. You can also follow NCSM on Twitter at mathedleaders and using the hashtag NCSMBold. Until next time.
All right, there we go. That's going to do it for this episode of the Amidon Planet podcast. Again, you want to check out those show notes at amidonplanet.com/episode 93, where you can, again, check out the NCSM Mathematics Education Leadership website and more episodes of the Learning with Leaders podcast. You can also, if you're looking for other ways to support this podcast, you can send questions, comments, and suggestions to joel@amidonplanet.com. Again, love the feedback I got on that episode of the Learning with Leaders podcast, the NCSM Learning with Leaders podcast. And again, being able to share that here so others can see that. But if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, you can send me an email at joel@amidonplanet.com. We're kind of tapping into some of those suggestions with some future episodes we got coming up. I'm really excited about one. Is if I can get it scheduled, I'm really excited about it. Anyway, so if you're looking for another way to support, you can do that. You can, again, send questions, comments, suggestions to joel@amidonplanet.com. You can also support the podcast by subscribing, rating, and reviewing. We are 2 months in a row having our best months ever, and that's kind of awesome. So that means people are doing that they're subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing, so other people can find that are looking for content like this can find it. So thank you so much for doing that. You can also follow at Amidon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amidon Planet Facebook page. And if you're looking for ways to learn more about what's happening around Amidon Planet, you can subscribe to the Amidon Planet download, which contains teaching resources and updates from Amidon Planet. Anywhere on amidonplanet.com where it says join the email list, you click that and allow you to join the email list. And so actually in that, when you join the email list, you'll get an email and it'll say, hey, why did you join the email list? And people can offer suggestions. And someone sent a suggestion in about these readable articles that people can use to learn how to teach better. And we're going to tap into that a little bit more. I got some ideas about who we can have come on because there's some of my favorite articles I'd like to share and talk about on the podcast, and we'll get those going pretty quick. So again, thanks for the feedback, and also thanks for wanting to get the download. Finally, check out the Amidon Planet store or Amidon Planet bookshop, where links are in the footer at amidonplanet.com. Any of your purchases can support the production costs of the podcast. It's not expensive, but it's not free. So appreciate any support that anyone can provide. All right. Thank you for spending time on Amidon Planet. Thanks to Katey and Brian for the opportunity to be on the Learning with Leaders NCSM podcast series. Thanks to NCSM, Mathematics Education Leadership, for having me on that podcast, and also for the great work that they do as well. And again, go ahead and check out those show notes. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. Finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.